Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jaywalker. Today, Mount Olivet Cemetery up on the east bench of Salt Lake City. Now, Salt Lake has some interesting things about a couple of its cemeteries. Salt Lake City Cemetery holds the distinction of being the largest city-owned cemetery in the country. Mount Olivet, on the other hand, holds the distinction after being, I think, the second oldest full cemetery here in Salt Lake that isn't family-owned or things like that. But it holds the distinction of being the only non-military cemetery in the country that was started by an act of Congress. The land that this cemetery was on was once part of the Fort Douglas military compound. It's still in operation today, but it's quite a bit smaller than what it had been, what it was. It's just a little farther on up the hill. Now, the reason why it was started back in the 1870s, I believe it was 1874, there was a group of religious leaders, all non-Mormons, non-LDS ones, who got together. I think they may have been afraid of the Mormon majority at the time, who they may have thought wouldn't let them get buried in City Cemetery. They were able to, for sure. It wasn't, it had never been a problem, but they wanted another cemetery here. And so they had petitioned Congress, and in 1874, the legislation was put into effect, was signed into law by Ulysses S. Grant. Now, one of the other little kind of cool things about this cemetery, and don't see a whole lot of cemeteries here. In fact, this may be the only one that I'm sure of, the only cemetery that really has one that I know, is a Masonic section. Now, I know that there's a lot of other cemeteries that have Masonic sections, but there really isn't one here, except this one. This row of metal markers, and these metal markers are probably some of the more, different ones that I've seen. I've seen a number of metal markers before, but nothing like this. And there's a whole row of them. There's also, just in here behind me, a lot of the majority of the people buried right here in this section. And it's not very big. Just that row of metal markers are the last ones, but this row, the majority of them are Masons. The majority of this row are Masons. It's over to where that concrete is, that sidewalk. And then all these ones in these last couple of rows here as well. It's kind of an interesting thing. There's also another little piece of construction that I'm gonna go walk over to and film as part of this. But this is just one of the strange, or at least for Salt Lake City, strange parts of the cemetery. Yeah, so just came up onto a different portion here. There's another pretty large, about 4 rows of Masonic headstones here. Looks like they've all been laid down at some point. I'm not sure if it was, I can't really tell at this point if it was they all stood up at one time and they just all maybe had fallen down, the bases weren't great, and they'd come back in and redone them, or what. But there's those. This is the other little portion that I wanted to film as part of the Masonic portion of the cemetery, and it's Masonic Memorial. I'm gonna come up here and gonna focus in on this. This meditation area is dedicated to the memory of those members of the Masonic fraternity who have passed on to the grand architect of the universe and to those who will pass on in the future. Their deeds and contributions will not be forgotten in the minds and the hearts of their associates. Created and dedicated by the Masonic Cemetery Association, William Falconer, President, William J. Lapsley, Vice President and Treasurer, Stephen L. Graves, Lyle Marlowe, Vern Erickson, Ray Larch, and site dedicated by Argenta Lodge number 3, Donald H. Panushka, AIA Architect, Dwayne C. Carpenter, Grandmaster, Free and Accepted Masons in Utah, August 1987, Mount Olivet Cemetery, Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, there's also compass and square with a G there, and probably the most interesting, there's the shrubs that have been grown into the compass and square as well. Like I said, this is just one of the more interesting parts of the cemetery. It's a cemetery that I really like, cemetery that I like coming into. Partially because of the mausoleums that are over here, which is definitely an uncommon thing, but also just because it is older. It's got a lot of larger memorials, larger stones, larger family memorials, which are really pretty cool. At some point, we'll definitely be getting more of those onto the channel here. Thanks for joining me today. Join me again when we go somewhere else, catch another fantastic story. See you soon.